Hello. So, the news today is I have entered to run the Loch Ness Marathon. I say run, I'm not really much of a runner. It's on the 27th of September, so the timing is perfect because it's got me stuff out of the way in May and then I'll have 4 months to train. In 2012, I ran the London Marathon. I got offered by a PR company a place, and it was one of those things. I don't know about you, but I've always watched the London Marathon on telly. And it's always been fascinating. I don't know why it would be fascinating to watch all these people just plod along, but I've always found it quite interesting to watch. So when somebody approached me and said, "Would you run the London Marathon and we'll give you a coach and do everything for you?" I found myself in a position where I couldn't actually say no. I had no intention of running a marathon. I'd never wanted to run a marathon. I didn't watch it on the telly because I wanted to run it. But when somebody gives you a chance of running the London Marathon, you kind of have to say yes, or I do anyway. So I did it. And it was horrible. It's funny, so many people say all the great things about running the London Marathon because they get a buzz of the crowds and it's a great atmosphere. And I hated it. I hate running in cities. I find them boring. I run in the countryside normally and I love that. And I didn't like all the people around. And actually, by the time I was getting round, most of the bands had gone. And it was just a thoroughly unpleasant experience. But one when I look back after a while, I was able to feel quite proud of myself for doing it. But there were a few things that I did wrong that I had that kind of niggling curiosity about. Saying I never wanted to run another marathon again. I mean, why would you? 26.2 miles, it's crazy. And it's not the marathon that's the problem, it's the training. It takes so much out of your life to train and do long runs that last 3 or 4 hours on the run up to it. It's really tough. Or 3 or 4 hours when you're a really slow runner like me. So when I got up in the morning, I just didn't fancy breakfast. Crazy, right? I was going to run for over 6 hours and I couldn't face having anything to eat. So I went into the marathon without having enough to eat. I started off with a couple of friends who had run together before, and they ran this technique where you run for 9 minutes and walk for 1 minute. And we all started on the start line together. And that was lovely. It was great to have the company and the camaraderie and all that sort of stuff. But after 9 minutes, they started walking. Now, my head works a certain way when I'm running. If you walk, you've given up. That's the rule in my head. So I start walking with them. So after 10 minutes, my brain thinks I've given up. By the time we got to mile 6 and they'd already swapped to 8 and 2, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. You guys have to go ahead. I'm just going to have to walk, jog my whole way. So I tried to make sure I didn't go under about 14 minutes a mile, which of walking and jogging. And, you've got all these people in the rhino suits passing you, people dressed as Big Ben, but you'd find markers and you'd find people that you're kind of keeping pace with. And keep going. And by the time I got to the end, yes, my legs were absolute agony, but my feet were okay. I didn't have any blisters or anything like that, so I did a good job there. And the next day I had to go and do a black tie event where I had to wear heels. So that was kind of interesting. But anyway, so I did that, and I always wondered what would have happened if I'd done it without messing up the start. Totally my own fault. And the other thing is, when I went into the London Marathon, I figured if all else fails, I'll walk. What's the big deal? I can walk 26 miles. I used to walk all the time. And then when you sign up a couple of weeks beforehand, in the material it says, if you don't finish within 8.5 hours, you don't get a medal. So suddenly this kind of, if all else fails, I'd walk, went right out the window. So I found myself having to go. So anyway, I already planned that by the time the court case in May is out the way, I will reclaim myself. That was my plan. Full on fitness regime, get myself back on track. I'm going in totally the opposite direction right now to where I want to be. And I know why, and it's fine, and there's nothing I can do about it. But the plan was, as soon as I can, get back on track. And then I thought, I fancy running the Loch Ness Marathon. I fancy doing it because it'll get me over some of the things that I didn't do right in the London Marathon. It's definitely not a city. And I knew a couple of other people that were running it. And it would give me the perfect goal. It'll start me running right now, which I'm finding hard to motivate myself to do, which is unusual for me. And so it'll pause, slow down what's going on in the other direction. And it gives me a full-on thing to train for once May's out of the way. And that's kind of, I guess, my advice that comes from this today, which is when everything's going wrong, go right, It's that kind of thing, which is when you got a lot on, and a lot of it tends not to be within your control. Give yourself something to work towards. I can't be doing with not having something to work towards, and it doesn't matter if it's something that's given to me by somebody else or whether it's something I do for myself. The book launch was my last thing. I have a couple of trips coming up, but that wasn't enough. I needed something, a milestone and a marker. And I chose the Loch Ness Marathon. It'll be very challenging. I'm not even sure I'll be able to make it, but I'm going to try my best, and it gives me something to work towards. So when everything's in the way, give yourself something. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be write a book. It could be take a art course. It could be start yoga, which is another thing I'm thinking of doing. It doesn't matter what it is. Just give yourself something to aim towards. Something that it's not about whether you succeed or fail. It's about the steps that you'll have to take to get there. And that's the critical thing. When setting yourself a goal, think as much, if not more, about the steps that you'll have to take to get there as the goal in mind. For me, the good thing about the Loch Ness Marathon is not the Loch Ness Marathon. It's not running 26.2 miles. Believe me, it is not. It is the actions that I will have to take to get me ready for that. And that's what the motivator is. So my tip of the day is set yourself up something. Something where the actions you have to take each day can be a sign of making progress towards that something. But not something where success or failure is important. Okay, catch you later. Bye.